Educators have always attempted to measure and assess student learning from the very beginning. However, in the last 60 years, educational assessments have taken on a vastly more important role. Most historians believe the past 60 years of educational assessments was sparked by James Conant, who was the president of Harvard in 1933. He used a relatively new test, the SAT, as a way to assess student potential for success at Harvard. He also helped create the organization called Educational Testing Services, ETS, which was and still is one of the major powers in educational assessments. And by the 1960s, more than 1 million high school students were taking the SATs. There's been many different types of standardized tests to test aptitude, learning, motivation, and virtually every aspect of education. Most states have implemented a required system of achieving testing. South Dakota, Smarter Bounce testing. These results of achievement tests are commonly used to evaluate and compare schools. In 1892, a committee was established by the National Education Association to study the functions of the U.S. high schools. The Committee of 10 made an effort to set down the purpose of the high school at the time and made the following recommendations. 1. High school should consist of grades 7 through 12. Courses should be arranged sequentially. Students should be given very few electives in high school. And 1 unit called the congregating unit that should be awarded for each separate course that a student takes each year, provided that the course meets 4 or 5 times each week all year long. They also recommended graduating high school students earlier if possible. Before 1900, teachers had relatively little decisions in their work because most educational goals were not precisely stated. However, in 1918, when the Commission of Reorganizations of Secondary Education published the report, Cardinal Principles of Secondary Education. They believe the 7 principles should be health, command of fundamental processes, worthy home membership, vocation, civic education, worthy use of leisure, and ethical character. The 8-year study, Goals of Education or Needs of Youth, were listed by the Progressive Education Association in 1938 and grew out of an 8-year study of 30 high schools conducted by the association between 1932 and 1940. The goals were physical and mental health, self-assurance, assurance of growth toward adult status, philosophy of life, wide range of personal interests, aesthetic appreciation, intelligence, self-direction, progression towards maturity and self-relations with age mates and adults, wise use of goals, goods and services, vocational orientation, and vocational competency. In 1938, the Educational Policies Commissions of the National Education Association set up the objectives that students should receive an education in 4 broad areas: self-realization, human relations, economic efficiency, and civic responsibility. 6 years later, in 1944, the same commission published another statement: the education of all American youth. Schools should be dedicated to the proposition that every youth in the United States, regardless of sex, economic status, geographic location, or race, should experience a broad and balanced education, which will equip each child to enter an occupation suited to their abilities, prepare each child to assume full responsibilities of American citizenship, give each child a fair chance to exercise the right to the pursuit of happiness through the attainment and preservation of mental and physical health, stimulate intellectual curiosity, and help develop an appreciation of ethical values. 8 years later, in 1952, the same commission made another statement: imperative needs of youth. These include all the following bullet points. The first formal teacher training school in the Western world, of which we have any record, was mentioned by a king in England, William, in 1438. William was granted his request by the king and established the Gadeshes College as a teacher training in 1439. Students at the Gadeshes College gave demonstration lectures to the following students to gain practice. Teaching classes were even conducted during vacations so that country schoolmasters could also attend. Two practices that are done by colleges today are scheduling classes in the summer so that teachers in service can attend and provide some kind of student teaching experience. Colonial elementary school teachers typically only had an elementary background themselves. It was commonly believed that the teacher required only that the instructor know something about the subject matter being taught. No teacher, regardless of the level taught, received training in the methodology of teaching in colonial America. Other duties for teachers were act as a court messenger, to serve summons, to conduct certain ceremonial services of the church, lead Sunday choir, ring the bell for public worship, to dig graves, and to perform other occupational duties. A single qualification for most colonial teachers was that themselves have been a student. However, most colonial college teachers, private tutors, Latin grammar school teachers, and academic teachers had received some formal education. One of the first forms of teacher training grew out of the medieval system in which young men or women wished to enter a certain field, served a lengthy period of apprenticeships with a master in their field. Many people who came to the United States bought passage by agreeing to work for some years as an indentured servant. The ship's captain would then sell the indentured servant, usually with an ad in a newspaper. Many that were advertised and sold as teachers, there were many indentured servants and convicted felons. Some colonial teachers learned their trade by serving as an apprentice to a schoolmaster. Some apprenticeships took 10 years. That person would promise to teach and instruct the apprentice to be taught and instructed in the art of trade or calling of a schoolmaster. One of Benjamin Franklin's justifications for the proposing of the academy in Philadelphia was that some of the graduates would make good teachers. As he said, a number of poorer sort of academic graduates will be hereby qualified to act as schoolmasters in the country, to teach children reading, writing, arithmetic, and grammar of their mother's tongue, and being of good morals and known character, may be recommended from the academy to country schools for that purpose. During that time, when Franklin said poor graduates would make suitable teachers, reflected the low regard for teachers typical of their time. In 1823, the first teacher training institute was established in the United States, called a normal school. It was established in Concord, Vermont. Early normal school programs usually consisted of 2-year courses. Students typically entered the normal school right after finishing elementary school. Most normal schools did not require high school graduation for the entrance until 1900. During the 19th century, normal school curriculum was much like the curriculum of high schools. Students studied elementary school, studied high school subjects, and taught teaching pedagogy, and did some student teaching in model schools. The normal school in Albany, New York offered English grammar, English composition, history, geography, reading, writing, orthography, arithmetic, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, human psychology, surveying, natural philosophy, and chemistry, intellectual philosophy, moral philosophy, government, rhetoric, theory, and practice of teaching, drawing, music, astronomy, and practice teaching. Normal schools eventually expanded through their curriculum in concluding secondary education. The growth of high schools also created a need for teachers who were highly specialized in a particular academic subject, so normal schools gradually established subject matter departments and developed more diversified programs. Teacher education programs were expanded from 2 to 3 to finally 4 years. The demand for teachers increased from 20,000 in 1900 to more than 200,000 in 1930. Also, the United States gradually advanced technologically to the point at which more college-educated citizens were needed. Normal schools assumed the responsibility to help meet this need by establishing many other academic programs in addition to teacher training programs. As normal schools extended their programs to 4 years and began graduating baccalaureate degrees, they also began calling themselves state teacher colleges. It was was not until 1900 did universities begin to establish departments of education and add full range of teacher education programs to their curriculum, just as the normal schools expanded in size and scope and function until they became state teacher colleges, so that state teacher colleges expanded to become state colleges. This change in name and scope took place for most institutions around 1950. State teacher colleges gradually expanded their programs beyond teacher education and became multi-purpose institutions. As for the transition was that the growing number of students coming to college demanded more varied education. Most of these state colleges later became state universities, offering doctoral degrees. With name changes with universities, for example, Dakota State University in Madison, South Dakota. It was created in 1881 and was first dedicated to train teachers in the Dakota Territories, called Dakota State Normal. Then in 1902, Madison State Normal School, 1921, Eastern State Normal School, 1927, Eastern State Teachers College, 1947, General Beadle State Teacher College, 1964, General Beadle State College, 1969, Dakota State College, and 1989, Dakota State University, with the addition of graduate programs. During the 1950s, the focus began changing from identification of what ought to occur in teaching to the scrutiny of what actually did occur. Ned Flanders and other researchers developed observational scales for assessing verbal communication between and among teachers and students. These scales permitted observations to categorize and summarize specific actions by teachers and students. These analyses were followed by studies of nonverbal classroom behaviors. Effective teaching movement that is based on research offers today's teachers important skills. Today's teachers learn to be strong leaders who direct classroom activities, maximize the use of instructional time, and teach in a clear, business-like manner. Effective teachers break down larger topics into smaller ones, more easily grasp concepts, and they focus on one thought, one point, or direct at one time. They check prerequisite skills before introducing new skills and concepts. They give step-by-step presentations with probing questions. Teachers offer detailed explanations of difficult points and test students on one point before moving on to the next. Technology has changed over time from the use of a stick or figure drawn of a symbol that's something in the dirt or sand or on a wall to printed words that are formed by educational technology. The hornbook was used in the Middle Ages, the slate tablet was used in the 1800s, the pencil and paper was in the 1900s, and now we have computers. Piaget created the cognitive developmental theory. Stage 1, sensory stage, which is the hands and mouth and eyes. Stage 2, pre-observational stage, and learning primarily through language. Stage 3, concrete observational stage, which is the use with numbers. And stage 4, formal observational stage, which is the ages of 11 through 15 and continues through adulthood. Benjamin Bloom believed that one could predict learning outcomes by assessing three factors. 1, the cognitive entry behaviors of a student, the affective entry characteristics, and 3, the quality of instruction. Skinner developed the behavioral theory, which was a theory focusing on outward behavior that suggested students could be successfully trained and conditioned to learn just about anything. This required the teacher to break down the learning into small sequential steps. Some critics urge schools to refurbish what they already have, abandon schools altogether, call for alternatives to traditional education, and endorse open education. The World War II GI Bill of Rights should be perhaps considered the most single important educational event of the past. Also, the desegregation of schools and the Federal Education of All Handicapped Children's Act. Some of the best advice to you is that you should expect to experience many changes, challenges, and ever diverse perspectives of education during your career as an educator.